would have a song. It would be from quite a famous person. It would come in at 26 in the charts, and then the next week it would be at 19, and then it'd be at 11, then it'd be at 6, then it'd be at 2, then it'd be at 1. It would take a month or more to get there. A really big act, like a Michael Jackson or something, probably still wouldn't go in at number 1, right? He'd go in at 3 and then be number 1 the week after. Stuff would climb. It would have to be heard and it would have to grow. By the
Build
time
momentum and sell records.
you didn't hear it, right? Because you know it'd have to be on top of the pops the first week before you'd ever heard it.
Yeah.
You go, oh, I like that song, I'm buying it. And some people would need a second listen or whatever. By the late 90s, that had changed, and new acts just went in at 1. They're just like, no, none of this climbing business, none of this intrigue or interest. It was like, I've got a record out. They'd go on all like the Saturday morning kids shows and things and go, yeah, we got a record out, and they'd sing it to you and you'd know it before they'd released it, and then it was straight in at number 1. And it killed off, I think, a lot of kind of the intrigue with, oh, how many is that, what's that going to do? Is that going to climb? Is it going to fall? You know.
Is that where the music industry started to become more industrialized, do you think, in the 90s?
Yeah.
And all of the money was like, if we spend hundreds of millions marketing our artists, then they're guaranteed a number 1, rather than the quality of the music being so that if it came in at like 20, whatever you said, that then people would hear it and that would be like a more organic progression.
The other issue you had was people understood, writers made the most money out of the whole thing. Publishing deals were worth a lot more than just kind of a performing record deal, unless you had some kind of amazing image and had a deal on that. So more and more you would find the producers or whatever taking over the writing, which I'm so removed from it now, but I understand that these days you have just a conglomerate of a handful of people that write most of the big hits for various artists. And when they say, well, who wrote this latest hit, and it's got like 7 or 8 people underneath it, because they're all creaming off the, oh yeah, and I came up with that bit where we clicked, and that was, you know, well done, here's a writing credit.
Yeah.
And
there's
so
millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, and so they kind of did away with the sort of artists who wrote their own things by themselves, and what they've done in that process is they've made themselves very wealthy, but they've kind of killed off interest, to my mind, in new music. Now, the way that they make money these days is by touring. And in the old days, the tour was to sell the album. So the album cost 10 or 12 quid, but the tour you could see them for 10 or 12 quid.
Yeah, and
then you'd sell the album.
Gig ticket prices are, you know, for the big artists anyway, like anything between £60 and £100.
That's the other way around, isn't it?
200 or 300, depending on who it is and where you want to sit. And so that, I think, is fundamental, where you have kind of disassociated the public from the artist making the art, you know. And so we're left with old geezers who are doing their best. I watched that Elton John thing at Glastonbury.
I was pleasantly surprised.
I thought, that's not bad. But it does feel a bit like, oh, he's good for 76, you know, which is sort of a backhander, isn't it? A little bit. Where you go, oh, well,
but then you then watch Guns N' Roses and you're like, oh, he could have, you know. I feel like Axl Rose can't really.
He gave himself a very hard task, I think, when he was like singing the songs the way he did at the beginning. He's never going to sustain it, was he?
But I get the desire to, and you can't. It's not like. Do you remember a few years ago when they replaced Slash for a bit in Guns N' Roses, and every gig they went to, they were just furiously booed.
Wow.
Things were thrown at the poor guy, and it's not his fault. He just wants to play music, but you could never replace Axl, because then you'd have the same sort of uproar.
No, I mean, the problem was, it worked at the time. So like when he was in his 20s, he could sing like that. But you've made a rod for your own back, because you're like, oh, hang on, You can't do that in the studio when you're 25. Go, oh, but hang on, when I'm 50, this will be a struggle. You know,
Yeah.
they might actually. This is the problem. They might do that now. They might do that now. Well, think about your legacy. Think about your 30 years of touring. You don't want to make it too hard to sing. Maybe kind of drop the key a bit. I wouldn't put it past them.
Some songs like Elton John, I think he wrote the music and he plays the music live, so he can change the songs as he does them. So he can like change the key.
Some
and
of the vocal melodies as well. He would like sort of dip out of the really high stuff, which you don't feel like you're losing anything because it's still him playing the song.
Oh, that cop out that they do, where they're in the middle of a gig and they're coming up to the high note and then they go, like, yeah, we'll get the crowd to do that because I don't fancy it.
I'm gonna pose something
Go on.
that I read recently about 90s nostalgia. There's a real big kind of effigy. There's a real sort of like conglomerate of people who are very passionate about. There's an emotional attachment to things that are made in the 90s, especially films. All of those PG rated films, they don't exist anymore because certification has changed. And I think in a way, those films and in a way the music around the 90s and probably the 80s was a reflection of what was happening in society and what was happening in our system, and the way that suffering was being kind of communicated through music was very palpable to audiences, and they wanted to own that. And now I think we don't have the same reflected experiences coming through music other than, people getting their hearts broken and people having, challenging upbringings and childhood trauma and things. There's no songs like, it was really difficult growing up being gay, or well, maybe you would have that. Maybe I wasn't a miner down the mines, and now I've got to like live the rest.
Because we have less hardship generally in like popular culture.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe it though when you listen to them.
Did you truly get to the end of this video? If you skip to the end just to see what I would say, then that's cheating. It is impossible for us to know whether or not you cheated, but you'll know. And with any luck, it will eat you up inside, chewing and gnawing at your soul until finally you break down in a public setting, embarrassing everyone thereabouts. Please subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for notifications.